This video was going to be simple. I wanted to get better at drawing backgrounds, and I was going to take you along a challenge. I was going to draw 30 of them. See what I've learned. It was going to be quite the grind, sure. But once I had a rhythm going, I could just put my head down and draw, right? I had an art style crisis while drawing my first background. Are you kidding me? Okay. Let's rewind and go back to my thought process before I completely derailed. Now, initially, it wasn't too bad. I made a list of all the types of backgrounds I wanted to do and picked a bedroom to start with. I've drawn detailed backgrounds before. This should be a really easy way to step into this challenge. And so I got busy. I also decided that this illustration could also be useful as concept art, so I designed it to be Ash's attic bedroom. Might be useful later for my webcomic? We'll see. I really liked how this drawing of Ash turned out, especially since I was struggling with the pose a bit, but the colors. I started laying them down, and they just started to look off to me. Like, the sketchy texture looks really fakey in a way that I hated, and I didn't feel like I didn't know what colors should go where. I even tried to lay out values in grayscale, and that didn't help either. I then realized that I might need just to use a different brush for background details. I mainly use Ayoup's Everything brush for everything, but it can't replicate the feeling of layering a sketchy texture over and over until it gets darker and darker, blah blah blah. A normal pencil can do that. This cannot. Maybe there's a brush in Procreate that can do that. I still like the Ayoup's brush for the characters though. And so I tried a new brush for the background light art and another for coloring. I actually liked them enough that I wanted to try to use them for the whole drawing. And so I modified the Procreate pencil brush for the line art and then used the peppermint one for color. I began to really like the line art to the point where I should have let myself put more detail into the line art. For the coloring, the sketchy texture was way better, but I still feel like I'm misplacing hues even up to the end of the speed paint. At this point, I had spent way too long redoing certain parts over and over that it just needed to be done. It needed to be finished. This took 4 days to get around to finishing. It's not bad, but it just feels mediocre to my personal standards for myself. And I was left thinking that if I had just drawn this exact same thing, but traditionally, it would just automatically look so much better. I make this comparison because my digital art style incorporates sketchy texture. A mini history lesson on my style, I guess? So the beginning of my college career, I really liked making sketches with a mechanical pencil and literally nothing else. If you watch my sketchbook tour video, you know that there was a lot of stuff like that in there. I enjoyed drawing like this so much that when I was in a class where I got to workshop my webcomic, I decided that instead of going for a more typical digital art style, to instead just draw like I do on paper. And that's been my method for a couple of years. I thought this was a nice marriage between the two because I get to draw in a way that I actually like, while having the convenience digital art brings. Personally, I like access to every color I can think of, and the ability to make a font. My handwriting is terrible. Sometimes, though, I get in ruts like this one, where I feel like I can't get close to my traditional style, and it looks worse. Why not just draw traditionally then? I'd like not to have to make a complete switch, since we're getting into the fall season, and it's getting darker and darker outside, and taking photos of traditional art will get even harder, which has always been my least favorite thing about traditional art anyway. I want to try some things before I make that choice. So, here's first of many experiments we're gonna do. I'm gonna take this drawing of a room that I made about 2 years ago with mechanical colored pencils and see if I can recreate it. To try to be as accurate to the original experience as possible, I will only be using 6 colors that are as close to the colors of the mechanical pencils, a single digital brush, a singular brush size, and all in one layer. I want to see if I can get anywhere close to recreating my traditional style digitally. Honestly, this first experiment turned out much better than I thought. I tried to study how I layered colors on top of each other in the original and tried to recreate that to the best of my ability. That's hard to do because digital brushes, or at least the ones I have, which is not many, don't layer on top of each other or mix colors like regular pencils do. I also realized that tilting my Apple Pencil made a smudgy texture that made large sections of colors like these walls stick out less and look more like the original by laying down the smudgy texture first and then layering thinner lines on top. But yeah, I kind of like it. But in order to truly see if this style can work, I have to do a couple more tests. For one, I want to see if I can have the same limitations with a more muted color palette and with a background that I just made up in my brain. So I ended up with this kitchen scene. The perspective is wonky, but it doesn't matter. I tried to think about each color in terms of their value and use that to figure out what should layer on top of what. I also tried to leave certain areas white, since I noticed that my previous drawing did that as like a negative space texture thing. And I took more advantage of the fact that colors can lay on top of each other easily without being drowned out by darker ones like they do in traditional art. The earthy tones were a little harder to work with, but I was able to make it look cohesive. I don't hate it. At this point I realized I need to blend traditional sketchiness with digital technique. I also realized that I was going to draw a character in this kitchen scene to see if my usual way of drawing characters mixes with background style, but whoops, we'll just do that with the next one. I also figured I should try drawing a more outdoor scene. I think this style works well with interiors so far, but what about scenes where there's large chunks of grass or bush? I threw in Balab this time to see if the usual way I draw characters meshes with the background style, and also the color palette ended up being purpley anyway, so I'm gonna use my purple coated OC, blah blah blah. Anyway, wow, I like this one too. I think the softness of the brush I use for the background makes the more precise line art of the characters stand out by comparison. It's in a way that I think is actually kind of charming. It reminds me of how in older 2D animated movies, the cel-painted characters would have these smooth lines and stylized designs and would really pop from the more painterly background. I also kept messing with tilting my stylus to get that smudgy texture again, and on some brushes it gives the drawing like a paper texture, which is aside from the one I keep adding in the background. I thought that was cool. I want to mess with that more. Cut to another character illustration. This time with my yellow-coated OC, Orinda, yippee! And I wanted to make a little magic swirl around her that took inspiration from these images I saw on Pinterest. Here's the original artist, by the way. For drawing the character herself, I actually took inspiration for these YouTube persona sprites that you are seeing. The difference between those and my usual art is the colored line art, less sketchy textures when filling in base colors, and kind of the cel-shaded approach to shadows. This one's cute, though I think I would have fiddled with the star a little more to make it look more like my references. I think if this is supposed to be magic coming from Orinda, there should be more solid line art. Again, like how props that characters would hold in animated movies would always have clear line art, unlike stuff that's just supposed to stay in the background. I also had another happy accident where the soft texture of the brush I used for the star thing ended up looking really nice as highlights shining on the character from the star thing. So now we have to mess with that again too, oh my gosh. Oh yes, we do. I also just realized that I did a sun and moon theme with these last two drawings. Lol. That must have been subconscious. This character I completely made up, by the way. So, this time I wanted to play around with moody lighting. I wanted to see if I could pick colors that would make the scene feel actually ambient, because I don't do that a lot, admittedly. I also wanted to add, like, the white shine on a character where the light of the moon hits them. I pulled back on the background's complexity to focus on the textures and picking accurate colors for the time of day the character's in. And it looks very storybook-esque, hello? Okay, I would play around with this more, but I'm cutting myself off here, because I've already answered the question that I asked myself at the beginning of this crisis. Is there a reason why I shouldn't just switch back to drawing entirely traditionally? Although I think I should draw traditionally more because I do miss it dearly. And I've also been able to draw traditionally for the webcomic, which has been really fun, and also I think part of the reason for this crisis. I think I've realized that the true problem with my crisis is that I got so obsessed with my art trying to recreate a particular look that is very difficult to achieve with a tablet that it was always going to let me down. Digital art just doesn't have to be entirely like my traditional art, and that's fine. I also just needed this crisis as a way to open the door to experiment and discover different techniques that allow me to do stuff with my art that I wasn't doing before. My professors at school were right. They did like my style. They just wanted me to experiment more with it and see what it can do so I just don't stunt my growth. And I think I'm on the path to exploring those possibilities today. For now, I just want to try to commit these new techniques to memory as we work on drawings for my next art video, which will be Cringe-tober, baby! Oh yeah, that's the next one. Super excited about it, actually. I've already done a decent amount of planning. Look out for that one. Hopefully I'll actually be able to draw 30 things in a row this time. Fingers crossed. Thanks for watching, lovely people. Subscribe if you want, and sleep well. Bye-bye!